Narayanam namaskritya naram chaiva narottamam Devim saraswatim vyasam tato jaya mudirayet. Nenire bhagavat-rupam shastram bhagavatam kalau Patanat shravanat yuktaha vaikunta phaladayakam. We have been relishing Vamshanucharita. In Canto 4 of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam, we get to relish the historical incidents connected with various great emperors who ruled Bharatavarsha. After relishing Dhruva Charitra in the context of a discussion on the descendants of Uttanapada, we relish Prutu Charitra. Continuation of a detailed account on the descendants of Uttanapada, continuing his account, Maitreya then gets on to discuss the descendants of Prithu. We must always keep in mind the conversation that is going on. This is Maitreya giving a detailed account on various dynasties to Vidura. This conversation started in 3rd canto and it is going to end now in 4th canto. Maitreya now talks about descendants of Prithu. After Prithu Maharaj decided to depart, his eldest son, Vijitashva, became the emperor. Vijitashva was also given the title as Antardhana. Antardhana, Maharaja Antardhana ruled the earth very righteously. He was a great king. As son of Prithu, he continued to rule the kingdom in the same lines as Prithu. Antardhana's son Havirdhana then took over, and Havirdhana was blessed with 6 sons, and the eldest son was named Barihishat. Maharaja Barihishat married Shatadruva, and they were blessed with 10 sons, Prachetasas. Barihishat was also known as Prachina Barihishat. Prachina Barihi popularly, and his sons were popularly called Prachetasas. There were 10 in number. While Maharaja Prachina Barihi was immersed in worldliness, his sons Prachetasas were immersed in spirituality. A great contrast between father and his 10 sons. Prachina Barihi ruled the kingdom well, but he was attached to his kingdom. He was attached to his possessions. He was materialistic by nature. Whereas his sons, Prachetasas, they were austerities came to them very naturally. They were on the path of bhakti right from the beginning, and they were immersed in devotional service to Bhagavan. The Prachetasas, once upon a time, took upon themselves to perform severe austerities. And when they were performing austerities, Lord Shiva was very pleased with them. Pleased with the Prachetasas, Lord Shiva approached them in order to help them. And then Shiva addresses them and looks at them and says, Yah param ram sahasakshat triguna jiva samhitat bhagavantam vasudevam prapannasa priyohime. He says, you are very dear to me. Looking at the Prachetasas, he says, you are all very dear to me. You know why you are dear to me? Because you have surrendered to Vasudeva. I recognize you are very rare to find people like you. Bahunam janmanamante jnanavan mam prapadyate Vasudevas sarvamiti samahatmasu durlabha. As Krishna said in the Gita, Vasudevas sarvamiti samahatmasu durlabha. A Mahatma who realizes that Vasudeva is everything, Vasudevas sarvamiti, Vasudeva is everything, is rare to find. Bahunam janmanamante. After several births, one may, if with the grace of Bhagavan, may reach that exalted state. Looking at the Prachetas, he says, Lord Shiva says, I am very pleased with you because you are such exalted souls. You have realized Vasudevas sarvamiti. He says, Bhagavantam Vasudevam prapannasa priyohime. You are true prapannas who have surrendered to Vasudeva. It is very important to understand the message that Lord Shiva is giving here. Vasudevas sarvamiti. The moment we say Vasudevas sarvamiti, Vasudeva is everything, and therefore the wise men surrendered to Vasudeva. This is what Krishna also says. Immediately, a smart person asks a question. If Vasudeva is everything, then why should I surrender only to Vasudeva? I can surrender to everything. Anything and everything. Vasudeva is everything. Vasudeva is sarvamiti. So therefore, if Vasudeva is everything, why should I surrender to Vasudeva? A very smart question to ask. Another smart person raises the question. If the object of surrender is Vasudeva, how can Vasudeva be everything? Another smart question to ask. So, while Krishna in the Gita possibly did not extend the shloka to explain this, Lord Shiva here gives a clear answer. He says, Yah param ram sahasakshat triguna jiva samhitat Bhagavantam Vasudevam prapannasa priyohime. Vasudeva is everything, no doubt, but everything is not Vasudeva. Vasudeva is everything, but everything is not Vasudeva. How do we understand this? It is very important to understand the sublime and subtle relationship between Vasudeva, Narayana, and his creation. This subtle and sublime relationship needs to be understood. While Bhagavan is immanent, he is also transcendent at the same time. It is because of his immanence, everything exists. Nothing exists without him. He is not the source. He is the very sustenance and the very summit. It is because of him everything exists, no doubt. But at the same time, he is also transcendent. He is immanent, but he is also transcendent. So therefore, to understand that Vasudeva is everything does not mean everything is Vasudeva, because he is also distinct and different. That is why here Lord Shiva is explaining, Yah paramam ramsaha sakshat triguna jiva samhitat. He is the owner and the controller of all the tattvas. Triguna jiva samhitat. Bhumirapo nalova yu kammano buddhirevacha. Ahankara iti yamme bhrina prakriti rashtata. Apareyam idastvanyam prakritim vidime param jiva bhutam mahabaho yayedam dharyate jagat. Krishna says. He says both prakriti and purusha, the achit tattva and chit tattva, belong to Bhagavan Krishna as his properties. He is the controller. Here, Lord Shiva is echoing the same message. Yah param ramsaha sakshat triguna jiva sammitat. The Prakriti made of three gunas and all the jivas are controlled by Vasudeva. Therefore, he is the supreme controller who owns everything, and that is the reason why one must surrender to him. Surrendering to him is natural because he is the controller, he is the owner. Bhagavantam Vasudevam Prapannasa Priyohime. So he says, I'm very pleased with you, and therefore I am here to share with you something which I have learned from Brahma. I'm here to share with you a prayer with which you can please worship Narayana and attain moksha. And Lord Shiva presents a beautiful prayer to the sons of Prachina Barhi. And to that prayer, he teaches them how to worship and how to attain moksha. Chitanta Atma Vidvarya Swastaye Swastirastu me Pavataradasaradham Sarvasma Atmane Namaha Namah Pankajanabhaya Bhuta Sukshmendriyatmane Vasudevaya Shantaya Utastaya Swarojishe. Talks about how Bhagavan, hey Bhagavan, you are the most exalted. You are the very embodiment of all auspiciousness. You are not only the source, you are the supreme controller, you are all pervading, and you are the changeless tattva. And this is why everyone must surrender to you. And then once he talks about the nature of Narayana, then Lord Shiva explains the Divya Mangala Vigraha in how to meditate on him. He says, Snigdha Pravrad Ghanashyamam Sarva Saundarya Sangraham Charvayata Chaturbahu Sujata Ruchiranamam Padmakosha Palashaksham Sundarabhrav Sunasikam Sudvijam Sukapolasyam Samakarna Vibhushanam Spurat Kiritavalahara Nupura Mekhalam Shanka Chakra Gada Padma Malamani Uttamaddipat. This is how one must meditate on. He's teaching the sons of Prachina Barhish how to meditate on the Divya Mangala Vigraha of Bhagavan in order for Bhagavan to become your anchor and ensure that you attain moksha. So Lord Shiva teaches this prayer to the sons of Prachina Barhish, and as this is going on, there is something very interesting happening way back in the kingdom, where the father, while the sons are deeply immersed in devotion and learning from Lord Shiva how to worship and how to attain moksha, the father, Prachina Barhi, is immersed in worldliness. And he is looking at how to expand the kingdom, how to grow his riches. And it is then that Narada, out of compassion, approaches him. After all, Prachina Barhi is a descendant of Dhruva, and therefore Narada wanted to give him the right knowledge. And Narada approaches Prachina Barhi and he engages in a conversation. Now, this is where we find a beautiful, a profound story narrated by Narada to Prachina Barhi. It's very important to understand the story. This is one of those stories in Śrīmad Bhāgavatam which is so very profound. So let us first go through the story and then try to understand what Narada is trying to teach Prachina Barhi. Now, Prachina Barhi, we all know, is immersed in worldliness, completely attached to all his possessions and constantly looking to expand his possessions, and at the same time he is also disturbed. This is the reason why Narada is in a conversation. Now Narada begins his narration. He says, "Hey Prachina Barhi, let me recount an interesting story to you. Once upon a time, there was a king by the name Puranjana. This king Puranjana was full of desires. He had countless number of desires, and he was looking for ways and means of fulfilling his desires. He was going all over the place to find a place where he can fulfill his desires. As he was going along, he found a beautiful city in Bharatavarsha down the Himalayas, a city by the name Navadvarapura. A beautiful city, so very attractive. The moment Puranjana came across the city, he was naturally attracted and he decided to explore this city. And this city is comparable to the celestial town of Bhagavatam, a city where one can experience all kinds of pleasures. So therefore, Puranjana decided to explore this city, immediately arrested his attraction, arrested him immediately. And then as he started to explore the city, he came across an exquisitely beautiful woman. So attractive, so magnetic. Puranjana could not take his eyes off this beautiful woman. Then and there he decided that he should marry her then and there. And he immediately approached this beautiful woman and he proposed to her. Now, strangely, this beautiful woman came along with 10 servants. She was accompanied by 10 servants, and each of these 10 servants had 100 wives. And as this woman came along, she was also protected by a 5-hooded snake. A woman protected by a 5-hooded snake with 10 servants, and each servant with hundreds of wives. Puranjana proposed to her then and there. And that beautiful lady accepted the proposal. And together they decided that they should marry and they should make this town, this city of Navadvarapura their own. Now Puranjana immediately asked her, "Who are you? Oh young lady, you look so beautiful. Where do you come from? Who are these 10 servants of yours and these hundreds of wives of these servants? What is this 5-hooded snake that is protecting you? Can you tell me more about yourself?" This lady immediately answers, "I don't have answers to any of your questions. I do not know my origin. I do not know where I come from. I do not know where these servants come from. I do not know why the snake is protecting me. And I do not even know how this beautiful city was constructed. I only know we are all here. I do not know anything more, to such an extent that we don't even care why we are here. We know we are here. Don't ask me any more questions." Puranjana agrees not to ask any more questions and decides to marry. So they decide and then they enter the city together to make the city their own. And then Narada explains the city, this Navadvarapura. He says, "Kadyotita virmukhi cha prag dwara ekatra nirmite vibhrajitam janapadam yati tabhyam humat sakha." He says, there are 2 important gates on the eastern side of the city. One gate is called Kadyota, other is called Avirmukhi. This Puranjana used these 2 gates to visit often the city of Vibhrajitam Janapadam. It seems Puranjana used to use these 2 important gates. This city had 9 gates, these 2 gates. One gate was Kadyotita, other is Avirmukhi. Through these 2 gates, Narada was explaining that Puranjana used to visit a city called Vibhrajita. But every time he visited the city of Vibhrajita, he always was accompanied by his friend Humat, Yati Tabhyam Humat Sakaha. And then he goes on to say, but 2 more gates, important gates. Nalini, Nalini. Nalini, Nalini Chaprag dvarag ekatra nirmite avaduta sakasthyabhyam vishayam yati saurabham. He also used to visit often another city called Saurabha. Puranjana used another two gates. These two gates called Nalini and Nalini, and together with his friend Avadhuta, he used to visit frequently Saurabha. One city of Vibhrajita, other city of Saurabha, often visited. Mukhyanama purastad dwas tayapara bahudanau vishayau yati purarad rasagya vipananvita. He also used to visit two more cities through another gate, which is Mukhya, which is called Mukhya. Through the gate Mukhya, he visited Bahudana and Apana, two more cities, with his two friends, Rasagya, Vipana. And this is what Puranjana always used to do, always visiting these cities together. And there was also something very strange this Puranjana did. There were many servants available, but he always used Nirvak and Peshaskriti, two servants who were blind. All his activities he did only together with these two blind servants, constantly doing activities. Nobody could understand why. Narada also said one important thing. Puranjana also had a companion. While Puranjani, the queen, had 10 companions, 10 servants with hundreds, each one hundreds of wives, Puranjana had one companion, and the name of the companion was Avijñata. But unfortunately, Puranjana always ignored this Avijñata. Completely ignored him all the time. Avijñata was trying to get his attention, but Puranjana completely ignored him all the time, and he was only enjoying with his wife Puranjani in the Navadvarapura, often visiting all these places, using all these gates, Navadvarapuras. And for all his activities, he only chose two blind men, two Nirvak, Peshaskriti. Now there was a time when Puranjana decided to go hunting, and for several days and weeks and months he did not go. He was always spending with his wife, but one fine day he decided that he should go hunting. And when he went on hunting, and when he came back, he found out the queen was furious, completely out of control. She did not like him go away, and it took him so much time, effort and energy to persuade her to such an extent he had to surrender to her and seek her pardon in order to get her attention back. Thus, Puranjana spent time with this beautiful woman, years and years and years together. And in that process, both Puranjana with his wife Puranjani, they begot 100,000 sons and hundreds of daughters. And time passed by. Puranjana was immersed in enjoying life with his wife. And as the sons and daughters multiplied, then he also decided to get the sons and daughters married. And as the sons and daughters married, then they begot hundreds and thousands of children, and Puranjana had thousands of grandchildren. But unfortunately, Narada said these grandchildren began to plunder Puranjana's wealth and started to plunder, and his possessions slowly started to reduce. And it went on and on and on. And there was a time when a Gandharva king by the name Chandavega decided to attack. Chandavega attacked Puranjana and the Navadvarapura. When Chandavega attacked Navadvarapura, Chandavega also had a daughter. The Gandharva king Chandavega had a daughter by the name Jara. And this daughter was going around trying to find a suitable bride. And it seems nobody was ready to marry her. And finally, Jara met the Yavana king Bhaya. And the Yavana king Bhaya decided to get his brother Prajvara to be married with Jara. And since then, Bhaya, the king, Yavana king, Jwara and Prajwara were going all over, and finally they decided to go to Navadwarapura, and it was the time when they arrived at Navadwarapura. Also, Puranjana started to notice that not only his wife, but all the servants of his wives and the wives of their servants started to revolt against him. He slowly started to discover that his commands were not listened to anymore. Everybody was doing whatever pleased them, and he realized that slowly he was losing control of everything. It is then that Chandavega's attack also grew, and over a period of time, the various parts of Navadwarapura began to be destroyed. And Puranjana was worried, concerned, he was in fear. And then came a time when Chandavega dragged Puranjana. The Navadwarapura was set on fire, and Puranjana was dragged out, and Puranjana refused to be dragged out because he was very much attached to his wife, to his children, to the servants of his wife, to the wives of his servants, and he was not willing to be dragged out. But Chandavega dragged him out forcefully out of the city, and Puranjana died, eventually to be found that he took rebirth as the daughter of the king of Vidarbha by the name Vidarbhi. Vidarbhi married Malayadwaja, and Malayadwaja was a Mahajnani. Malayadwaja decided to give his kingdom away to his sons and went on Vanaprastha. Vaidarbhi was so very attached to Malayadwaja, she also followed suit without really understanding all about Vanaprastha. She only knew one thing: to be attached to Malayadwaja and serve him lovingly. And Malayadwaja went on Vanaprastha, performed severe austerities, worshipped Narayana, and eventually attained moksha. But Vaidarbhi did not understand that Malayadwaja's Atman has departed. And as the body was lying, Vaidarbhi was not ready to give up. Holding on to Malayadwaja's body, she was lamenting in great grief. Initially, she even did not realize that Malayadwaja was dead. She was continuing to serve him, continue to wake him up. And then finally she realized he was no more. She was in grief, not knowing what to do. Then walks a Brahmana who introduces himself as Avijnata and says, "Hey Vaidarbhi, why are you lamenting? Why are you crying?" Vaidarbhi looks at this Avijnata, the Brahmana, and says, "Who are you?" And then Avijnata looks at Vaidarbhi, says, "This is the question I wanted to hear from you for such a long time. At least now you noticed me and asked this question, who are you? I have been always with you, but this is the first time you even noticed me. The fact that you have asked this question, who are you, means you've taken notice of me." Very interesting fairy tale, but very profound. Bhagavatam has, apart from several legends and historical accounts, allegories. And this is one such allegory which is so very inspiring, so very profound. Narada was giving this narration to Prachina Barhi. Now we need to rewind a little and go back to the very beginning of the story of the allegory to start to understand what was Narada trying to convey to Prachina Barhi. Because a Mahatma like Narada definitely would not be just narrating a fairy tale. And such a fairy tale where It's very difficult to understand the head and tail of what he is actually speaking. What is this Navadvarapura? Who is this queen? Why she has 10 servants? Who are these hundreds of wives? What is this five-hooded snake? Who is this Chandavega? Who is this Jara? Who is this Bhaya? Who is this Prajvara? What is happening? Who is this? Who is this Puranjana? That's where we need to start. Puranjana. Pura is the body. Puranjana, an enjoyer of the body. This is the embodied soul. A Jivatma who is entangled in samsara, a Jivatma embodied is Puranjana. Narada is actually talking about the travails of an embodied Jivatma, the travails of a samsara. And in that process, is giving quintessential essence of Tattva. It is Narada teaching Tattva Jnana to Prachina Barhi. Now, when we go back and look at the Dwaras, what has been explained, suddenly we get to understand what Narada is talking about. Kadyota avirmukhi cha pragh dwarav ekatra nirmite vibhrajitam janapadam yatitabhyam humat sakaha. Puranjana often visits through the two gates. Kadyota avirmukhi. What is Kadyota and what is avirmukhi? Kadyota means glowworm. Avirmukhi means torchlight. Visits the city Vibhraja. Vibhraja means clear vision. Puranjana uses two gates and goes with a companion Dyumat sun, essentially performing the activity of seeing. Seeing to the soul sees the objects of the sense objects, this world of forms, through the two eyes, with the sun, with the help of the sun. So essentially here Narada was talking about the two eyes and the process of seeing. Nalini chaprag dwara ekatra mithe avaduta sakastabhyam vishayamyati saurabham. He also often visits the city of Saurabha. What is Saurabha? Saurabha means aroma. Avadhuta is the companion. Avaduta means air. This is the process of smelling. Nalini, two nostrils, the two gates. Mukhyanama purastad dwas tayapana bahudanau vishayoyati purarad rasagnya vipananvitaha. Puranjana also often visits the two cities of Bahudana, Apana. Bahudana means variety of foods. Apana means speech. So using Mukhya, the gate of Mukhya, which is mouth. So using the mouth with two companions. Rasagnya, Vipana. Rasagnya is tongue. Vipana is the faculty of speech. Using tongue and faculty of speech, this Puranjana, this embodied soul, uses the mouth for eating and speaking. And so on. Narada uses metaphors to basically convey. Therefore, this Navadvarapura is nothing but the human body, which has 9 gates. This 9 gates, this human body that has 9 gates is the base into which the Atman enters. Now, this is the physical body. We need to understand the existence, the various levels. This allegory also explains to us that the Atman is distinct and different from the physical body. It is distinct and different from all the sense organs. It is distinct and different from the prana. It is distinct and different from the subtle body, which is the mind. It is distinct and different from the subtle body, which has manas Ahankara, Chitta, and Buddhi. It is distinct and different from Chitta, Ahankara, Manas, and Buddhi. It is different completely. So one needs to understand, I am different from my body, I am different from my senses, I am different from my mind, I am different from my intellect, I am different from my prana. Who am I? I am the Atman. Ajo nityaha sasvatoyam purano na anyate yamane sharire. Everything else deteriorates, everything else keeps changing all the time. Everything else has an end and beginning. The Atman doesn't have an end and beginning. Ajaha nityaha sasvataha puranaha. Here, Puranjana, the Atman, when it comes across this beautiful, who is this beautiful lady? This beautiful lady is the mind. This beautiful lady is the mind that overpowers the Atman, captivates the Atman. The mind is so very captivating. The Atman identifies immediately with the mind, falls in love. And the moment the Atman identifies with the mind, it identifies with the body in which the mind is housed. The identification starts there. It is very important to understand that we are all defined by our identity and our activity. We are defined by the activities we perform, and our activities in a way are influenced by our identity. And it is our identity and our activity that will shape our destiny. Our identity and our activity will shape our destiny. If our identity is this, I am the body, if my identity is the body, the name and this form, then I am so very attached to this body, and the summum bonum of life is just sense gratification, nothing more, nothing less. Now, this identification that I am this body will define all my activities. All my activities are going to be selfish in nature. All my activities will be towards sense gratification alone. And this will shape my destiny. My destiny is extermination at the time of death. Because at the time of death, there is no more body. There is no, this identity perishes. The so-called identity that is developed throughout the life is exterminated at the time of death. So therefore, identity and activity will shape the destiny. When I recognize and realize my true identity, Ajo nityaha sasvatoyam purano na anyate hanyamane sharire, I am above and beyond this body, I am above and beyond this mind and intellect. I am distinct and different. If that is my identity, my activities are also influenced by this identity. My activities are no longer only for bodily gratification. My activities are determined by my identity that I am the Atman, I am part of Paramatman, I am his Amsha, he is my Amshi, I am Sharira, he is Shariri, I am Sesha, he is Seshi. And therefore, serving him and his creation alone is my purpose, and every activity that I do becomes a service to him. And when my identity is right and my activities are determined by this identity, my destiny is also shaped accordingly. Then at the time of death, my destiny is not extermination, my destiny is elevation to eternal happiness with Krishna. Here, Puranjana has completely got his identity wrong. He identifies with his queen. Narada says, it seems Puranjana was so very attached, he was so very trapped by the beauty of the queen and his attachment that when the queen sang, Puranjana sang. When the queen ate, Puranjana ate. When the queen danced, Puranjana danced. When the queen cried, Puranjana cried. When the queen loved, Puranjana loved. He had no identity of his own, completely playing to the tunes of the queen. Here, this is exactly what we do, completely playing to the tunes of our mind. Now, we all think we are free. We all think we are very free. We think we can control things. No, this is what is called illusion of freedom. We need to understand that freedom can be easily and effectively taken away by giving illusion of freedom. Let me give a simple example. We walk into a car sales room. The salesman, if he's an ordinary salesman, the salesman would do the sales pitch and then he would ask, do you like the car, sir? He's an ordinary salesman. A brilliant salesman, a pro, he would not ask that question. He would say, sir, do you want red seats or black seats? What would you prefer? Do you want leather seating or you want regular seating? Here, he is giving the buyer the illusion of freedom. So he's not asking, do you want to buy? Buying is already taken for granted. You have only limited freedom to choose what features you want within the car. Illusion of freedom. Freedom in a limited domain. This is exactly what mind does. We are walking, we are going across on the road, we see a sweet shop. The mind starts giving options. Do you want a rasagulla? Do you want a rasamalai? Or do you want a laddu? Great freedom. The first question to ask is, do you want to eat at all now? The mind doesn't give the freedom to eat. The decision to eat the sweet is already taken. No freedom there. But it gives pseudo freedom. This is what? Illusion of freedom. So we think we have the freedom. See, I am choosing. Today I decide rasamalai. Tomorrow I will eat rasagulla. But I am not supposed to eat any sweet. I have taken a decision. I am making the choice. The mind gives the illusion of freedom. Thinking that we are in control, this is pseudo freedom. This is exactly what happens here. Puranjana, he thinks he is in control, but he is exactly doing what the queen wanted to do, completely attached, playing to her tunes all the time. Now, we see here when Puranjana one fine day decides to go away hunting, leaving the queen. And when he came back, the queen was very furious. She was demanding complete submission. Great lesson here. This is what our mind does to us. Sometimes we take the courage of saying no to the mind. We say, no, I will do what I want to do. We exercise our willpower. The mind will come back strongly again. We'll say, how dare you try to master over me? And it will be even more powerful than before, dragging us back to what it wants us to do. This is what happened to Puranjana, and Puranjana succumbed, and we too succumb. Now and then, when sattva rises, we take some good decisions. We say, no, I will exercise my will. My mind cannot dictate. No, I'm going to reprogram myself. New Year resolution. New Year is coming. We'll take a New Year resolution and we'll tell the mind, no way, I'm going to exercise every day. Then I'm going to lose 10 kgs weight. I lose 10 kgs weight in 1 week, and the next week, with vengeance, I will regain 20 kgs. The mind will not allow me, because the mind wants to keep me under its spell all the time. This is what Puranjani, the queen, did to Puranjana. And if this Puranjani, the queen, is the mind, the Navadvarapura is the human body with the 9 gates. What is this 5-headed hooded snake which is protecting Puranjani? This 5-headed snake is nothing but the Panchapranas. The Panchapranas do the role of protecting the body all the time, constantly protecting. A very difficult job indeed. We do lots of things. We abuse the body to a great extent all the time. The Panchapranas try to regulate as much as possible. Panchaprana, when we say prana is nothing, not just to do with just breathing alone. Every stimuli that goes inside the body is regulated by the Panchapranas. Every stimuli, not just air, visual stimuli, food, air, everything that goes in. And we take in all kinds of junk all the time, knowingly or unknowingly, and the Panchapranas work overtime to regulate. And over a period of time, they also start giving up. That is old age. Panchapranas also start struggling to regulate. Until everything works, we take everything for granted. We eat everything and anything because we don't even know what is this process of digestion. When we start looking at how this digestion process works, how miraculous the overall design is, what all happens within the body for something simple thing called digestion. We think it's very simple, so very complicated. Only when it stops working, we start questioning. Only then we come to know there is something called digestion. Therefore, here the Pancha Pranas are represented by the 5-hooded snake. The 10 servants of this queen, the 10 servants of this mind are the 10 Indriyas, Karma Indriyas and the Jnana Indriyas. And each of these servants have 100 wives, hundreds of wives, we should say. Who are these hundreds of wives? Desires. Hundreds and hundreds of desires. Now, Puranjana, identifying himself with the queen and with the body, spends years and years experiencing bodily pleasures. And then what happens? We see Chandavega, the Gandharva king, attacking. Now, this Chandavega has always been attacking, but Puranjana never noticed. Who is this Chandavega? Chandavega, something which moves swiftly, is Chandavega. So Chandavega, that which moves swiftly. Time. Time is Chandavega, that which moves swiftly. We think time doesn't, sometimes time may not move swiftly, we think, but whether we like it or not, it is moving all the time. Time and wind are one and the same. Just like how wind keeps moving, the clouds keep pushing the clouds keep moving. Because of wind, we also keep moving because of the time, whether we like it or not. There are two similarities between the wind and the time. Both are invisible and invincible. The clouds have no choice. Wind is invincible. Just effortlessly keeps pushing the clouds. The clouds have no choice but to keep moving. Time also is invincible. We have no choice. Keep moving. We may think I am noticing time, hours, minutes, but we do not note. We may be looking at the clock on a daily basis for some of our activities, looking at hours and minutes, but we miss out on the months and years. How many of us realize we are actually growing old year by year? We conveniently ignore the fact. Time is moving and is pushing us, but we conveniently ignore the fact. Chandavega, Puranjana suddenly notices that Chandavega is attacking. But he's been attacking all the time. Time is attacking us all the time, right from the time we took birth. But in our childhood and youthhood, when health is perfect and things are smooth, we completely ignore. What is time? In our youthhood, we don't really care for time. We don't really even care for health because everything is working perfectly. The arms are working, the legs are working, the whole body parts are working. The moment we hit late 30s, early 40s, slowly the body will start slowly saying, hey, so you need to start noticing. And that is when we notice Chandavega has actually been attacking us for a long time. We have ignored Chandavega. Puranjana ignored Chandavega long. And Chandavega's daughter Jara, sooner or later, is going to come and occupy. Jara, what is Jara? Jara is old age. Material nature, whether we like it or not, forcefully will make us become old. We become old helplessly, unfortunately, whether we like it or not. So Jara is definitely going to come and occupy one day or the other. And Puranjana notices that very late. And Puranjana here has, together with the queen, has thousands, hundred sons and hundreds of daughters, who then have lots of more children and grandchildren. Who are these? These are all karma phala that we accumulate. The more karma we do, sakama karma that we do, the more karma phala that we accumulate. And action and reaction and action and reaction, and the reactions, the karma phalas keep multiplying, exploding exponentially. Suddenly we realize we came into this life with some amount, and suddenly we have multiplied it so much. The baggage, instead of becoming lighter, is only grown multifold. This is exactly what, and we suddenly find, as Puranjana found, his children and grandchildren started to plunder his possessions. This is what our own karma phala will come and haunt us, whether we like it or not. And then Chandavega is attacking. Jara, together with the Yavana king Bhaya and Prajwara, the wife of Jara. Prajwara, fever, disease. Bhaya, fear. Sooner or later, the combination of Jara, Prajwara and Bhaya is going to occupy the Navadwarapura. And when one is gripped by Bhaya, Jara and Prajwara, that is when one starts to realize what has really happened in this something called life. Puranjana realizes it too late in the cycle, and by which time Chandavega is already dragging him out. The Atman is forcefully dragged out because the Atman is so very attached to that body, so very much identified, because its identity is defined by the body, by the mind. And who would want to lose one's identity? We are all fighting to defend our identity because we all want to exist forever. We cannot think of non-existence, can we? We can never think of non-existence. But if the identity is with the body and the mind, non-existence is something which is unavoidable. And this is why Bhaya rules, the fear of non-existence. But the reality is, there is nothing called non-existence to the Atman. We are eternal. There is no reason for Bhaya. But Puranjana is completely misidentified with the body, misidentified with the mind. So he had to be dragged. The Atman cannot leave the body so very easily if the attachment is so very strong. The Atman has to be dragged out, and Chandavega is dragging the Atman out. Puranjana is dragged out, and Narada says, what happens to Puranjana? After death, he takes the life of Vaidarbhi. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tajatyante kalevaram tam tameva iti kaunteya sada tadbhava bhavitaha. Puranjana is only thinking of the queen. What will happen to her? What will happen to her? What will happen to her? And then he takes the birth of a woman. Yam yam vapi smaran bhavam tajatyante kalevaram tam tameva iti kaunteya sada tadbhava bhavitaha. Even after taking birth as a woman, as Vaidarbhi, his attachment, his vasanas to be attached to matter, to be worldly is still there, very strong. The worldliness in him is very much there. So he's attached to Malayadhwaja. Even though Malayadhwaja is a Mahajnani, that attached, because of that attachment, Puranjana or now Vaidarbhi, the Atman in the body, could not recognize reality. And when Malayadhwaja departed, Vaidarbhi, attached to Malayadhwaja's body, is lamenting. And that is when Avijñata walks back again. This poor Avijñata has always been with Puranjana. Hey Puranjana, I was with you before. Don't you recognize me? Hey, who are you? Vaidarbhi asks. And Avijñata says, thankfully you are asking me this question. At least now you have asked. Arjuna asked Krishna after 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 chapters, who are you? No, in 11th chapter, Vishwarupa Sandarshana Yoga, Arjuna looks at Krishna and asks, who are you? But it's very important to ask this question, hey, either be, who are you? You want to know me, but first, fundamentally, you should also know who are you. So let me put this question back. Have you ever asked yourself this question, who am I? Only when you ask this question, because you have never ever contemplated on this question, who am I? What is my true identity? If you have never contemplated, you will not easily find answer to this question, who are you? To know Bhagavan, first, I should know who I am. That is why Bhagavad Gita is structured in such a way that in the first 6 chapters of the Gita, Krishna does not talk about himself. He is only teaching Arjuna to ensure that Arjuna knows his nature. Who am I? Who am I not? And then to know who when I know who am I, and then I know who is Bhagavan, then I know the relationship between. Now, if either be, first ask this question to yourself, who am I? Are you Vaidharbi? Are you Puranjana? Now, Vaidharbi, you are a woman. In your previous birth, you are a man, Puranjana. Are you a woman or you are a man? Start asking this question. First, know that you are the Atman. You only are entangled in a body. And who is this Malayadvaja? Malayadvaja is now just lying as a body right in front with no life. Where is Malayadvaja now? He's gone. So why are you lamenting? Malayadvaja has already attained moksha. And you are lamenting here. And then this Avijñāta obviously is none other than Paramatma Sri Krishna, Bhagavan. He says, do you recognize me? I have been with you all the time, not in your previous life, in the previous life before, and the life before, and the life. As you have been journeying, taking different kinds of bodies, I have been with you all the time. Unfortunately, you never, ever looked and even asked me this question, who are you? You ignored me completely, and that is the reason why this is the root cause of all your ills. If only you had asked this question before. If only you tried, you made an attempt to know who you are and who am I, and our relationship, you wouldn't have gone through all these perils. You wouldn't have gone through all these calamities. You wouldn't have been in this situation lamenting for something which you should not be. And then Avijñāta gets into a very detailed conversation with Vaidharbi or Puranjana, whoever it is, the Atman there, instructing on, giving Tattva Jnana. A detailed exposition on the nature of the Atman, the nature of Prakriti, the nature of Paramatman, the relationship between the Atman and the Paramatman, and the relationship between the Atman, the Paramatman, and the Jivatma. And when you realize this, then all this that you have gone through, you would see that you could have avoided all of the ills, all of the sufferings, you could have very much avoided. Now Narada looks at Prachina Barhi and says, now do you realize, Prachina Barhi, why did I share this story with you? You have been running after something. You are a king. You have an able body. You have an able mind. You have an able intellect. With all these endowments, what have you done so far? Your own children, the 10 Prachetas, they are on the right path. And what have you been doing? Haven't you wasted all the opportunities that have been given to you? And Narada then expands further and talks to Prachina Barhi on the nature of the Atman, the nature of the Paramatman, and Prachina Barhi is enlightened. And Prachina Barhi then immediately decides that he should invite his sons and he installs them as the kings. And then he immediately takes Vanaprastha and goes on and spends the rest of his time devoted to Bhagavan and eventually attains moksha. And then the 4th canto of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam concludes on the glorious note on how the sons of Prachina Barhi righteously ruled this kingdom. So across all the segments of the 4th canto, we see how through both by giving a detailed account on the actual historical incidents, legends, and real stories and allegories. Maitreya teaches Vidura quintessential essence of all the Shastras, the Vedantas. Every question that Vidura had, when we go back and see right at the beginning of the conversation between Vidura and Maitreya, Vidura wanted to know several things on creation, on secondary creation, on the nature of this creation, on the nature of Bhagavan, how to worship him. Maitreya says, this is how I managed to give you, in the context of answering your questions. Maitreya gave Vidura a complete account on the various Vamshas and Vamshanucharita, Sarga and Pratisarga, and finally the allegory of Puranjana. Maitreya concludes the discussion with Vidura saying, Adhyatma Parokshamidam Mayadigatam Adbhutam Evam Striyashrama Pumsaha Chinno Amutracha Samshayaha. Hey Vidura, Maitreya says, when one realizes the cause for bondage, the cause for samsara, when one realizes the forces that are holding on one to remain in this cycle of repeated births and deaths, and when also realizes one's true nature, that is the time when one, without any doubt, will also find a way out of the cycle as well. And Maitreya says, in my own way, within all the constraints that I had, I managed to give you all this wisdom. Vidura is thrilled that he met Maitreya, and he concludes the conversation with Maitreya and goes back to Hastinapura. And thus ends the 4th canto of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. With this, over the last several months, we have successfully completed 4 skandhas of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. Let us prostrate to Maitreya and Vidura. Because of them, we could also relish glorious incidents in our history and get to know a lot of things that happened way past, which are very relevant even to this very day. Let us also prostrate to Shuka Brahma, who faithfully captured all of this in his account to Maharaja Parikshit. Let us prostrate to Vyasa Bhagavan, who composed all of this out of compassion to us by giving us Bhagavatam, which is full of nectarine rasa, that gives us the very essence of Veda and Vedanta in a way that we can easily relate to, understand, and relish and cherish. And let us prostrate to our own dear Krishna, who has ensured that we could spend all of this time together completing 4 skandhas of Śrīmad Bhāgavatam. Sarvam Sri Krishna Arpanamastu.